awesome. And I dare say, like I said, I will know many of your names by the end of this hour-and-a-half session, I think. I'm going to speak to you today about the work called Toledot Yeshu. It's the earliest Jewish polemical composition written against Christianity. It was a bestseller from late antiquity until the present. In terms of the topic of this seminar that I'm speaking as a part of, it was a work that circulated under the wraps. It was attacked by Christians as lies and deception, and it was circulated by Jews in secret ways, which we'll talk about. This composition circulated in surprisingly large attestation among the Jews of Muslim lands, that is Arabic-speaking lands, in the language called Judeo-Arabic, which you're going to walk out of this room knowing a lot more than you do at this instant, if you're like, what's Judeo-Arabic? We're going to have a look at some text together. That comes from my current research, my current book project. We're going to look at my translations from Judeo-Arabic and also a text that's translated into English from Hebrew. We're going to start with a PowerPoint with some introductory material for all of you who said, what is Judeo-Arabic? Because I need to tell you about that. And then we're going to get to the text. So one really important thing, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions while I'm speaking. I don't want any noise in your heads because I said something and it was not clear, and ask me right away. Okay, so I'll be really happy for that. So I want to start with two brief introductions to set the stage. The first introduction is going to be how Jews started speaking Arabic. I mean, for many of you, I think there are two students here, Abraham and Jamal, who probably have some knowledge that Jews spoke Arabic besides my students. But many of you who are focused on the European world, or who may not be focused on the Jewish world at all, probably are asking, wait, is this minor, is this marginal? Well, it's not minor, it's not marginal. For about 3 or 4 centuries, from about the 9th century till about the 12th or 13th century, much of Jewish intellectual output was in Judeo-Arabic, which I'm about to explain what that is, and 90% of the Jews in the world during this period, let's say the 9th century till about the 11th or 12th century, were speaking Arabic as their native language, 90%. Okay, so we're not talking about a marginal phenomenon, we're talking about something that's really important for students of Jewish history. So what is Judeo-Arabic? Since when does it exist, and why is it important? So I have up here a map. The world, this is from the map collection done by Hugh Kennedy, which is a great map collection. The world on the eve of the Muslim conquests around 600 AD. So this is, if you get up close, you can see the empires that are mentioned here: Sasanian Empire, Byzantine Empire, the remains of the Roman Empire in the west. The next map shows you the beginnings of the Islamic conquest of this region. So you can see that the region that was formerly the Sasanian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Western Roman Empire, has now become unified under one religion, and most importantly, one language. Because the Islamic conquest in the 7th century did two things. It brought a religion to much of this region, and conversions happened gradually, but they did happen. This region became majority Muslim, in different areas that happened at different stages. This is something we could talk about, but in any case, it's not that it didn't happen immediately, and it happened in very different ways in different places. But in any case, the important thing is that we have a religious conquest and a linguistic conquest. So if you think about the languages that were important in this region prior to the Islamic conquest, in 750, I just took that date. What is the date 750 for those of you who study Islam? Okay, so it's the founding. Thank you, Avram. The founding of the Abbasid Caliphate. It's not the beginning of the Islamic conquest. The beginning of the Islamic conquest were in the early 7th century, first and second thirds of the 7th century. But anyway, this is the map that Hugh Kennedy had available, and it shows the sort of beginning extent of the conquest. So what languages, back to the languages, what languages were important in the region before Islam and Arabic made their way in?
Persian, Greek, but also Latin.
And Aramaic.
And,
You forgot very important. The lingua franca, of course, because you were assuming we all knew the lingua franca was Aramaic, true? So the lingua franca was Aramaic, used by Christians, Jews, pagans of various types, and by the way, surviving in little pockets in the Middle East until today. A fascinating story. Persian used in this area, definitely Greek and Latin, as Jamal pointed out, in this area, but also in the Holy Land and other areas. These languages were mostly taken over by Aramaic. Let's say whereas Aramaic had been the lingua franca, it would have been the language in which you composed if you were a Christian, if you were a Jew. By the time the 8th century comes around, Jews and Christians, and obviously those who had taken on Islam as a religion, are largely writing in Arabic, writing and speaking in Arabic. The Persian areas are a different story. Persian stayed on, they obviously changed their script. That's not the story that we're talking about today. But Arabic as a language accomplished its conquest of the region. So now I'll show you the last map. So this is, you see, a bit more into Spain, a bit more east, all the way to the edge of India. So by this period, by around 900, which is the period that we're going to talk about, Arabic had become the mother tongue of most of the inhabitants of major cities, of villages, except for the Persian areas, okay? So the Jewish communities that I'm going to be talking about today were most comfortable in the Arabic language. And this had really, really important consequences for the Jewish communities of that period. So I'm going to explain to you now the significance of this linguistic switch. And this has to do with the Authorial Revolution in Arabic that I'm about to talk about. So there were two major consequences for Jews to this, to the Islamic conquest, and let's call it the Arabic conquest, okay? So religion and language. First of all, it meant that in the year 900, if we choose that as a point, the Jew who spoke and read Arabic, most Jews, had access to everything being produced in Arabic. Now, why is this important? Because in the 9th century, this was where things were happening. This is where the bodies of Greek philosophy, rhetoric, works in Syriac, Greek, Pahlavi, all of these had been translated into Arabic already during the early Abbasid Caliphate, 8th century. Most of these treasures from the ancient Near East had now been rendered in Arabic and were available to the Arabic speaker and reader. That's number one. So you had access to this wealth of material, and this was a period in which the Jewish religion, the Jewish bookshelf changed very, very definitively. And I'm about to explain to you exactly what that meant for what Jews were writing. The second one had to do with the everyday, not just the books that you were reading in manuscript, the works that you were reading in manuscript, but it had to do with your everyday intellectual context. And it meant that Arabic was being used by all. It meant that intellectually there were very few barriers between adherents of different religions. So dialogue, debate, and polemic began in a very deep and rich way between Jews and between Muslims, Christians, Zoroastrians, Manichaeans, all of the various religious adherents that would have been part of this, this backdrop. Okay, now I want to talk about what that meant when we're talking about written texts. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, any questions till now? Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the authorial, what I call the Authorial Revolution in Arabic. This is one of the manuscripts that I'm working with on another project. This is the work of, here I could ask Jamal and Avraham to read this. I can read it to you, I'll read it to you, just and then I'll say what it is. Okay? Do you want to read? هذا مختصر تفسير. Okay, تفسير. This is Hebrew already. كرشات بالشيت. Okay. That's a wow. والشرح معانيها. This is a verb. ألف. ألف باء. Yeah, it's kaf. اختصاره, and here's the name of the author, Yaakov ben Rabbi Ishaq ben Rabbi Sam'awi al-Kirkasani. Okay? نخو إذن من التفسير الأول الذي تولاته وتصنيفه. Okay, we don't have to go on. So now let me explain. It says, now this is my example for you of the Authorial Revolution. I'm just going to prove it to you. Okay, this is an author. His name is Yaqub al-Kirkasani. Kirkasani means he was from one of two places, Kirkasiya, which was a small village in the area of Baghdad, Karkasan, which is also a place in the area of Baghdad. He was from the area of Baghdad. A Jew, a Karaite Jew. We can talk a lot about Karaites later if you want. It's not the subject for today. And this is Hada Mukhtasar Tafsir Parashat Bereshit. He created a Bible commentary. It's a commentary, you recognize the word Bereshit. It's a commentary on the book of Genesis.
This is the summary.
Which he summarized his own, though. He wrote first the long commentary, and then he summarized it. Now, when medieval authors say they summarized it, it's always a summary, it's an adaptation, he's adding to it, it's not a summary. Chock full, no summary here. But in any case, what is important here, we have an author here in the 10th century. Obviously, this is a later copy. Okay, first of all, if you look at this script, this is not 10th century script. This is, I have it in my notes, but I can tell you, 13th, 14th century script. It's a copyist, but this is what the author wrote to explain what he was writing. Now, for modern readers, it's the author. He's talking about his book. In the 9th and 10th century, this was new. Okay, the 9th century was a revolution for Jews and for Muslims. They began to write authored compositions, a work. A work has a beginning, it has an introduction, might even have a list of chapters in the beginning. You say, I am the author, this is why I wrote the book, you answer questions, this is the point of this book, this is the use of this book, this is the audience for this book, even questions like that, modern day questions that an author might answer. Inside the book, there will be discussion with the reader, real talking between the author and the reader. You know, listen to this. By the way, as I said in the last chapter, you can see the structure of the book from within, and then a conclusion. This was new. Jews and Muslims had not written like this before. The 9th and 10th centuries are also when they began to write things down, as opposed to transmitting knowledge in oral form. Okay, a big, big change for Jews and Muslims. By the way, for those of you who work on medieval Judaism in late antique or early Islamic period, this is the period in which the Talmud is actually written down as opposed to being just transmitted orally. But not just that, the Talmud is one of the earlier works. You know, there's not a clear author, it doesn't have a clear organization. In the 9th and 10th century, if you're a Jewish author, you're sitting down to write, you're writing in Arabic, and you're writing in a way that makes it clear what the composition is, who you are, and you're not using a pseudonym and you're not attributing it to an earlier famous figure. And this is an example of that. So this is al-Kirkasani writing in the 10th century and making it very clear that he's the author of this work. It's an ikhtisar, it's an abbreviation of a work. You know, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he exemplifies the characteristics that I just mentioned throughout this work, you know, referring to other works. There's some very interesting research that's been done lately on how medieval authors promoted themselves. I mean, you could take it, okay, he's referring to his other work, you know, he needs to do that, but no. A colleague of mine has recently, Svi Stamfer, has recently written work on how medieval authors, for example, Maimonides, Saadia Gaon, promoted their works with these self-referential comments. So this Authorial Revolution is a real phenomenon of writing in Arabic by Jews and Muslims. Why am I leaving out Christians, by the way? For those of you who deal also with Christian texts.